I am so excited to be here today with Mayor Kim Janey, and I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. I know we've tried, so many times to get together, but today is the appointed day and time. And I want to begin with our title, which is Politics Matters, because it does. And I'm so thrilled that you are in this season. I mean, it's such a different season. We're in the midst of the pandemic, COVID-19, a lot of civil unrest throughout our nation. And here we have you as the first and only woman mayor in Boston and woman of color, person of color. And so you carry really a big weight. And so I want people to know a little bit about you. What is your journey into politics? How did you end up here?
So first, let me just say thank you, Pastor Mona. I am a big fan. As you know, this church is very important to me. It's where I was baptized. I am just grateful for the opportunity to be here with you. As the first Black mayor and the first woman mayor for the city of Boston, it is certainly a big historic moment for our city, for our country, and it is important that we meet this moment with the urgency and the bold leadership that it deserves. For me, everything is political. You want to put food on the table and feed your family. You want a roof over your head, a good job. So many of the everyday decisions that many of us take for granted are governed by municipal government or state government or federal government. And so it is really important, or it has been for me, my entire life, to be engaged. I also just grew up at a time in our city and in a family that believed in public service, that believed in doing your small part, whatever that might look like. Running for office isn't something that I imagined for myself as a child or as a young person. I think it is something that people around me encouraged me to do. Finally, I did it in 2017. I ran for office and became the first woman elected to represent District 7. And in 2021, I am now here as the first Black mayor and first woman of the city of Boston. And it is a big weight, certainly being the first, because you don't want to be the last. And it is happening at a time in our city's history, in our country's history, when, again, we need to tackle so many challenges that are facing us. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to serve and to lead.
One of the things that I have loved about you throughout the years is we went to elementary school together, and you have always been consistent in your poise, in your knowledge, in your wit. And I thought about this, and I thought, what an opportunity for us to come back together again, almost, 40,
Can't do the
40,
math on
40
that one.
plus years
Yeah.
to now sit, and I am sitting with a history maker. And, when you're a young child, you don't know where the trajectory of someone's life will be. And to know that, over 40 years ago, sitting in elementary school, that you would be appointed to be, the weight of your position, the first, in a list of female pioneers, in a list of, African-American women pioneers. When I think of Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, Shonda Rhimes, Elaine Welteroth, they are, they've made strides in their industries. And what would you say to women that, whether there are a teacher, like in a classroom, or a woman that is sitting and watching, and she's thinking, what can I do to make a difference? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. For me, there have been so many trailblazers, as you have already indicated. Women have been in leadership for quite some time, since the beginning of history, in fact. We certainly know the stories in the Bible. We have seen it in recent years where women are now being recognized for that leadership. And I just want to make that distinction, because I think too many people are looking at this moment as suddenly women are stepping up. Women have always stepped up. Women have always been leaders, whether in church, whether in their homes, whether in their communities. Black women in particular have always had to make a way out of no way. And so the fact that we are sitting here 40 years after elementary school having this conversation, I think it is important that we recognize that women have been in leadership, and there have been so many before me, even in recent history. It was not that long ago that the Boston City Council had no black women. Ayanna Pressley blazed that trail, and she blazed another trail, becoming the first black woman to represent Massachusetts in Congress. We have a district attorney that looks like us. And so there's a lot of recent history that we can turn to, but just important to point out that women have been in leadership, and it's now the rest of the world is catching up and really recognizing that leadership.
So I think a lot of times in our community that, women often feel like their education prohibits them, or lack of education prohibits them from being a trailblazer, or they don't, come from wealth. So how can you speak to that, to the woman who just feels like, what do I have to offer?
I mean, I've felt that way. I know many of us do, but that is the world that we live in. And so it is important, I think, for us to, you can be no one but yourself. Everyone else is taken. Yeah. So just be you. Trust yourself, trust your gut, trust your creator, trust the path that has been set forth for you. Walk that path with confidence. Surround yourself with people who care about you, who love you, who want to see you succeed, who will help you, who will guide you, even if you're kind of venturing off on the wrong path, who will help you get back on that path. I think it is really important that we kind of stay the course. The course is not easy at all, not at all. And you mentioned appointment. Really this is God's appointment in many ways. This isn't anything that I sought for myself other than to do the work, to be someone who, wanted to do the work, who was doing the work, committed to that work. And that work is racial equity work, racial justice work, just trying to make my small corner of the world a better place for all of us.
When you were sworn in, it was such a significant moment as your granddaughter was next to you. And you were saying so much without saying so much. What was that moment like for you, and what was it like for her?
I mean, it is still mind-blowing for me. So the swearing-in ceremony is a month ago. It was a month ago. So I've been doing this now for a month, and as I mentioned earlier, it was really important to pay homage to all of the women who had come before me. And my granddaughter, obviously, is coming after me, and she was holding my grandfather's Bible. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. That was his African heritage Bible that I took the oath of office using his Bible. And to have her hold it, my grandfather's Bible representing my ancestors, and then to have my granddaughter hold that Bible as a representation of the future, who can now grow up in a world and see herself reflected in the 55th mayor of Boston. I just think it was so powerful. And, you know, this is in many ways kind of normal for her. For me, growing up, I had no one to look to that looked like me in the corner office for the city of Boston, or hardly any in elected leadership at all. And, you know, I mentioned on that day that my older grandchildren, my grandsons, were born at a time when there hadn't been a black woman on the city council, and now my granddaughter gets to see someone who looks like her in the mayor of Boston. And it's not just important for little black girls, it's important for boys. It's important for all children, black, white, Asian, Latino, to see what leadership looks like.
And with that, in terms of education, what are your plans for education in the city?
Well, education has always been important to me. I'm born into a family of educators. You know, my parents taught. My father went on to become a superintendent of major school districts. My sister is still teaching in Boston Public Schools. You know, as a young girl, I you know, first went to school, to a community school. Before you and I went to elementary school together, my parents were very active in that school. In fact, my family helped to found that school. It was one of the independent schools that was started by the black community and the Jewish community that had come together because BPS was not educating black children well, and so that was my very first experience for kindergarten and first grade. By second grade, I was in the Boston Public Schools and saw at that time, when I first enrolled, they wanted to hold me back a grade because I was coming from this community school, and my parents fought for me to get into my right grade, and that was an important lesson in the power of parent voice and parent advocacy. By middle school, by 11 years old, so you and I were fifth grade at the Higginson, but by 11 years old, when I was in middle school, I was bused during the desegregation era, and that was a painful and traumatic time for all of the children and families who were bused. But again, my parents fought for me, and by 8th grade, I was in the MECO program. I took all of those lessons with me throughout my life and career. I dedicated, in fact, much of my career in child advocacy and advocating for equity and excellence in a nonprofit before running for office. And it continues to be a priority as mayor of Boston because I know that we have to put our young people on a path to success. And we need to do that by investing when they're young. In their education and making sure that we're doing everything to eliminate opportunity and achievement gaps that exist in our schools. So I'm really proud to continue my work that I was doing all these years, whether advocating for greater teacher diversity or diversity in our exam schools, supporting our young people, supporting our teachers, particularly as we are coming hopefully to the close of this pandemic. You know, our young people are scheduled to be back in the classroom fully if they choose to be so, starting on Monday, so grades K through 8. And so making sure that we can reopen our schools safely has been a huge priority for me in this last month of as mayor, and I will continue to fight for young people moving forward.
Well, I love how your history has dictated where you are today, and the deep roots that you bring even with your family and your parents' advocacy and your sister. And that is something that you can't make up. It's legacy that is being lived out, and I really appreciate the fact that it's not something that just made its way to your agenda. It's something that you have always fought for, not just for your own immediate family, but for all children. And I definitely applaud that. And sometimes, you know, in political matters, and I love how you started out saying everything is politics, whether it's food on the table, whether it's education, whether it's home ownership, everything somehow trickles to the place of politics in our community. And often in communities of color, we're warring because we've been so far behind. And so in terms of home ownership, and you've talked a little bit about education, I know home ownership and home equity is part of something that you're also concerned about. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it is one thing that will certainly help stabilize our communities. It is directly related to the wealth gap in Boston, and we know for Black families in Boston, they have a net worth of $8 as compared to white families in Boston, which is $247,500, a huge wealth gap. Wealth is created, generational wealth is created through ownership, whether that be home ownership or owning a business. And for many folks, buying your first home, that is your largest asset, you know, probably the biggest asset you'll ever own. It is your chance to pass on generational wealth to your children and your grandchildren. And so it is really important that we do more to ensure greater opportunity for home ownership in Boston for all residents, but particularly for residents who have been left out. And we know that residents have been left out because of redlining. This was intentional. It was discriminatory. And we need to address that if we're going to close the wealth gap and if we're going to get to a place of true justice in our society.
Just recently, you were interviewed and you were standing in front of, I believe it was your grandmother's house? Is that?
It could have been, was it in Roxbury?
Yes.
So it was probably my dad. So
Your dad's home.
when in the South End, it was my great-grandmother's house. And speaking of generational wealth, you know, they weren't able to hold on to this brownstone. This was in the South End when the South End was being gentrified. That brownstone now has been broken up into several condominiums that are each selling for, over, exactly.
Yeah,
I think the
$1 million.
last one was 2016 for $1.5 million. That was a missed opportunity, certainly, to pass on generational wealth. But the interview was probably in my childhood home in Roxbury, which was with my dad.
And that home was sold as well.
Yeah, so my grandmother, my bonus mom, Janey, her mom owned that house, and it was a duplex. So it was just wonderful to have my grandmother, Darlin, on one side, and we lived on the other side. There was just always kind of family events, functions, cookouts, singing. My grandmother had a piano, so, it was a very musical family. In addition to growing up in a family of educators, it was a family of artists. So it was just always wonderful to have family around.
Well, for me, it's been thrilling and exciting because I do know your family. I know the roots that your family have in the city of Boston, and knowing that not just a woman, not just a person of color, but a person that is rooted and grounded, not just in the struggle, but also in the success. And your family has had a lot of success in the city. And so we talked about your granddaughter. What has this been like for your daughter?
My daughter in many ways has been my inspiration. I had my daughter very young. I was still in high school. She was certainly my motivation. She helped me understand very early on the importance of fighting and advocating for all children, because I saw her success and her path being interconnected to other children around her. This is obviously very different for all of us, but I think she is certainly a very proud of the work that I've done and certainly what this means for the city of Boston. I love my city. I say that I will always give my all to the city that gave me everything. And I could not be more grateful for the opportunity to serve and lead the residents of Boston, particularly now during these various challenges that we're facing. Many of these challenges, whether it be housing insecurity, whether it be food insecurity, whether it be domestic violence or sexual assault, I've lived and experienced these challenges myself. And so, when I am leading through a lens of equity, love, and justice, these challenges are not theoretical for me. This is something that I have experienced. And so when I say I understand, it is because I have been there. And so.
Yes, one of the things that, was important for me in terms of talking to you, we can see what your agenda is. Anyone who's following you, it's easy to read that, in the news report and to hear different things that you've spoken about. But I wanted people to really see the personal side of who Mayor Kim Janey is. And because I have a history with you of going to elementary school, we didn't keep in touch because we didn't have social media back then, right? But I was very good friends with your sister, and your daughter and I are related. And I thought, I've known Mayor Janey through the years, and you have been so consistent. You have been such an overcomer in struggle, just as you said. And our conference this year is talking about renewal, talking about you can't be renewed if you haven't gone through something, right? So the city can't be renewed unless there's a struggle. And so that your whole work is really bringing renewal, bringing rebirth to the city of Boston, especially in this time across our nation when we are struggling with, policing and racism and violence. And it's you are like a breath of fresh air. You're coming in with the understanding of not just the struggle, but you're also coming in with the understanding of legacy. And I believe that, people seeing that side and understanding that this isn't just an agenda for today, it is what has been lived. And your consistency, I can say, even as a person on the outside, your consistency has been one that I have admired. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come, because I know that there's so many things that are going on and so many, fires that you're putting out, so many challenges that are happening in our city. But for women that are tuning in to see that you are one of us, but you've been called to lead this great city, and that we believe in you.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so, so grateful. I don't know to do anything else but to be me, and so that's just how I show up. And I think renewal is just what we need. It is, in fact, part of the agenda that I am bringing forth for the city of Boston. It's an equitable recovery, reopening, and renewal.
Yes.
And a big piece of that renewal is a joy agenda and making sure that we are intentional about being in spaces and places where we can create joy. That we have to be intentional about creating that joy, taking time to rejuvenate, taking time for self-care, taking time to care for our loved ones and our family, whether that is planting in a garden, whether that is singing, and well, we can't sing now because of
Yeah.
COVID.
Right.
But,
Yep.
when appropriate to do so, just those little things that bring joy, whether it be like a concert, whether it, whatever it is, that we have to be intentional. And it's really important because the work continues. The work to dismantle structural racism is not easy work. Change is always hard. I think people are ready for change in a different kind of way pre-COVID and pre the killing of George Floyd and so many others. I think people are hungry for change, but it is still hard work, and so it's really important that we take time to build and reconnect, particularly after a year of isolation and devastation, that we have to rejuvenate. And I'm a big believer in building bridges while the sun is shining, because I know the storm will come, and this work is hard work. And so it's important that we build these relationships and these connections to each other and find space for joy so that we can do the hard work. I say all the time that I am bringing my Black girl magic to this job, but it's not magic that is going to solve all of these problems that we're facing. It is work, and it will take all of us doing the work together.
Well, that, I think, is the perfect ending. And in the spiritual world, what we say is faith without works is dead, right? And I like to say faith with works is fully alive. And your work speaks for itself. Your work is, I mean, I was driving just today, and I was in Hyde Park, and I came across the new campaign, was on a billboard for the arts. And I will say to you, it made me very joyous. And I said, a change has come, because I feel it I feel a change has come. And something as simple as a poster board with a woman artist that can be like it was a little turn on a hill, and as I was turning, and to see this woman of color and expressing herself through the arts was so powerful. And I want you to know that it's working. So thank you. I think I've asked all the questions that I wanted to ask. Do you have any other closing remarks?
Thank you so much. This has just been a wonderful opportunity to sit and chat with you. As I said, I am just grateful for the opportunity to serve, to lead the great city of Boston. I am fighting for a stronger Boston. I want to make sure that we come out of this pandemic a better Boston, a more equitable, more just, and more resilient Boston. And so I'm just grateful for the chance to be here, to speak with all of the women who are here at the conference, and ask that people engage with us in this work. So thank you.
Yes, engagement. Yes. Engagement is very important, and we hear that charge. And so women, engage in politics, because they matter. Politics matter. As the mayor, her first line was, politics is in everything. So everything that you do, whether it's starting a garden, supporting local businesses, investing in your neighborhoods, investing in children, investing in your school system, all of those things matter. And if you're looking to get involved, please, there are so many nonprofits, so many places that you can go to get involved in your community. And again, we just want to give a thanks and a shout out. As women, we are so proud and so honored to have the first female person of color in office in the city of Boston. And we look forward to all of the advances that you are going to make. And I am positive that they will be many. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.